In the Company of Charity is a podcast by the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. Each episode will be discussing the church, society, and service to others, all through the lens of the spirit we received from St. Vincent de Paul, the Saint of Charity. Join in the conversation by sending your comments and questions to companyofcharity@gmail.com. So hi, everyone. This is Sister Elizabeth, and a welcome to In the Company of Charity, a podcast by the Daughters of Charity, and I am joined by my favorite and most wonderful co-host, Sister Liz Schoberg. How are you doing today, Sister Liz?
I'm doing great, and I would like to note that I am also your only co-host, so
Well,
I kind of have to be your favorite.
My father used to say I was his favorite first daughter. Well, that would work, Dad.
I mean, he could go either way.
No, I was his favorite. You're my favorite first daughter. So, that's good, Dad. Thanks. So you are my favorite co-host.
Thank you.
And it's always good to be with you. Yeah, good to be with you. So we have a really very relevant and, all joking aside, a very serious episode today with Sister Meggie Flores is interviewing Linda Rivas, and they're talking about immigration. And Linda Rivas is part of Las Americas. Sister Meggie is down in El Paso, and so that's kind of the backdrop of what this episode will be about, is the immigration issue there. And I know we did a couple of episodes about refugees that I did with my coworker Jen at the Refugee Center here in Utica. And as I was listening to this episode, I realized that the issues around refugees coming from the UN process, coming through refugee camps, coming through special visas, people coming from Afghanistan and Iraq, those coming from countries around the world through a refugee process that's in place for them through the UN. Very, very different process, very different experience than what's happening on our border. And I think that's something really important for people to understand, that the word refugee, while it encompasses a particular group of people who are fleeing their country because of war, violence, persecution, lots of reasons, that those coming from our southern border are not passing through the same process that those coming from African countries or Asian countries. They're not staying in a host country that's set up with a refugee camp. They're showing up at our border seeking asylum. And I think it's very relevant, obviously, that you are a part of this conversation with me because you're there. So, you and I are both kind of working with folks who are fleeing violence, who are seeking a better life one way or the other, either financially or looking for safety for themselves and their family, fleeing some kind of persecution. And yet our experiences with the folks that we serve are very different. So I thought maybe, you could give us some of your ideas, some of your insights as you minister on the border.
Sure. And this episode is important to me because we're really right in the thick of it in Brownsville and McAllen, Harlingen, sort of on the other side. El Paso's way over there in the west, and we're sort of in the southern Rio Grande Valley, and it's really a challenging time. And what I would recommend is, for anyone listening, if you haven't heard the YouTube video from Father Mike Schmitz about the church and immigration, go over clearly after you're done listening to this podcast, go over to the YouTube channel and hear what he has to say about the head and the heart, which I think are really two very important pieces. Acknowledging that the church honors the fact that countries have a right to defend their borders and to sort of regulate that process. But on the other hand, the heart of it, which is people have a right to migrate, and we have a duty to welcome the stranger as Catholics and as a country that has a tremendous amount of resources. And I think, we see the complexity of it down here. I have coworkers, people we know from the parish, whose family members are undocumented, whose maybe a husband or somebody else in their family works for Border Patrol. It's too emotional and close to us for us to say, well, I want a wall, or I want everybody to be able to have an opportunity to come in. There are real human lives on both ends, and we realize that it is a very emotional and gray process, which I think, when you look politically speaking, it's there seems to be extremes, and we just kind of live right in the middle, in the midst of it. And you're going to hear that. This is kind of an interview of Immigration 101, the current state of how things are, at least in El Paso. And a lot of those themes are very much the same as the ones over here in the RGV, Rio Grande Valley down here. So I know people are going to get a lot out of this.
I think you referenced Father Mike Schmidt's video as well as this episode. I think what's really important to me, and what I think is good about this particular episode, is that it is very clear about what the process is, what can happen, and what isn't happening. Like what is the expectation of somebody who arrives at the border? What should happen? What is the legal process? And why is that beginning to break down in some ways? And so I think it's important, because I think when we do sit around our kitchen table, when we sit around in coffee shops or wherever it is we're going to be, that we have the facts, that we have that information, and that it comes from people who are working in this, not people who are just reading it second, third hand, and not always sure where their news is coming from. But these are folks who are right there, who are trained to do this. And as you said, they're almost like blended families. There are some who are in this conversation because they're working on the border as Border Patrol. Others are in the same family, are working in nonprofits, trying to be helpful to people as they arrive and helping them as they transport through the country to meet up with family. Very interesting balance. And so I think it's important to hear the facts, hear what's being said. Check out Las Americas, check out the work being done at Annunciation House in El Paso, again, to see what's the truth of it. If you can't see it with your own eyes, then see it through folks that we know are giving the voice the best quality and the truthfulness possible. So I think that's why this kind of episode is really important. So hope people get a lot from it in that way. I think both Sister Meggie and Linda are very, very clear about what they see and what they're experiencing. So, and maybe Sister Liz will get you back to talk more about, as you say, where you are is a little bit different. It's a different part of the state, and yet it's also a border city, and you have the issues that you're dealing with as well. So I think it's not a topic that's going to go away. That's for sure.
Right. And the other thing is Sister Salvatrice is offering a very thoughtful reflection on the other end of the interview. So stick around after it's over.
Good afternoon and welcome to the podcast in the company of charity of the Daughters of Charity. And today we have an interview with Linda Rivas from Las Americas in El Paso, Texas. Hi, Linda, and welcome.
Hi, sister. Thank you for having me.
I am just thrilled to do this interview with you, and thank you for being willing to do it.
Absolutely.
Despite your very busy agenda. Okay, I would like you to tell me a little bit about yourself and what Las Americas is and does.
Absolutely. So my name is Linda Rivas, and I am honored and privileged to serve as the attorney and Executive Director of Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center. I am a first-generation Mexican immigrant. Luckily, was able to have citizenship by virtue of my mother's citizenship. So, my citizenship and my immigration story comes with a lot of privilege that other people's stories does not have. But I am so proud to say that I am an immigrant, and I am very, very proud that I'm able to serve a community of immigrants and refugees through Las Americas. And Las Americas is a 31-year organization, almost 32 years. We were founded in 1987. And we are an organization that was started with a mission to help the asylum seeker, the person fleeing persecution. And we started with that mission, and we continue to meet that mission today. And we have expanded our mission to help immigrants and refugees from all across the world in different forms of legal representation for their immigration case. We help people who are in removal proceedings, people who are not in removal proceedings but perhaps are living in the shadows or somehow need to regularize their immigration status.
When it comes to immigration, there are so many myths and opinions, but what is the reality of immigration law? Is it just, unjust? What is the reality?
There are many, many myths. There's a myth that people can get in line. That is probably the biggest misconception. Why don't you just get in line? Why don't you do it the right way? There are people who have an immigration story, and they still don't see, sometimes it feels like this comment can lack compassion. And maybe they don't understand that it lacks compassion because they don't understand the system. For many people who do not have a direct relationship, whether that be in the form of a spouse, whether that be in the form of a child over 21 years of age that lives in the United States and is a citizen, or a brother or a sister who is a citizen, they don't have a line to get in. And for some people, that line is incredibly long. For example, for Mexican citizens, let's say you have a sibling. You are a citizen of the United States. Your sibling is Mexican. You would like to petition for that sibling. That wait period is about 30 years. The way that the visa bulletin, that means the visas that are given by the Department of State on a yearly basis, there's only a certain amount. And they've become so oversaturated throughout the years. And there has been no change in immigration law throughout the years. There has been no substantial reform. That line, while it looks like it's 30 years, when you actually see how it moves, they actually calculate that it's closer to 80 to 100 years. So for some people, the line is non-existent. For some people, the line is too long to wait.
Wow. So sad. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the most common misconceptions of the line, that doesn't really exist for any. And I think that we need to look at it with compassion, and people wanting to reunite with their families, or people escaping bad situations. Or why don't we just honor people who want a better life? I mean, migration is a part of, it's a part of humanity.
Mm-hmm. It's a right,
Absolutely.
Well, there's a lot going on here in the border. We've been kind of busy.
Just a little.
Just a little. And a lot of people are coming in. A lot of refugees are coming in. I have an understanding that there's 8 shelters here in El Paso and 4 in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So what is really going on in the border right now between Texas and Mexico?
So I think one thing is very important also to not fall into some myths or some maybe fear that some people are seeing in the media. There has been an increase in Central American families coming into the United States since the last couple of years. But we do have to remember that migration is still at historic lows. But what has changed is who is coming in. We used to have more people coming to work, such as, men coming to work in and back and forth every day. And migration patterns have changed, and now we're seeing more families. And the reason for that is the desperation that's happening in these Latin American countries. That includes Mexico. But right now the highlight is definitely on Central America. The situation in Honduras, which gets worse and worse, El Salvador and Guatemala. And a lot of it is also what the role that the United States plays in providing weapons to these governments that are filled with impunity, that are filled with corruption, and us kind of taking a look in the mirror. So yes, there is currently an increase in families coming to the border. This increase is leading to agencies such as CBP, Border Patrol, so that's Customs, Border Patrol, and ICE, really trying to hold the door closed for people, and something we don't agree with. They list their reasons, and we as advocates, we must push back because we believe there's a more humanitarian way to do things than we believe they've done it in the past. So currently what we're seeing on the border with the shelter network, for example, the Annunciation House has managed, through the help of different parishes and through the help of the goodness of the hearts of citizens and answering the call to help the neighbor, that we have been able to meet the needs of the refugee that is passing through. We are El Paso, Texas. Our name is very literal. Central American families are meeting with their families. These are families that have been in the United States for many years. They're coming from, these networks of strong Central Americans that have made this country what it is today, that have helped establish so much in the service industry, in the agriculture industry, in the construction industry. And these people are trying to meet their families. And their families are saying, I want to take care of you. And they're ready and willing to meet them. And we serve as a place for them to pass through, a place where they will be received with dignity and respect after having gone through, the crossing of the border.
Mm. Yeah, I've been to some of the shelters to help, and it's just heartbreaking to see these families. Like last night I went, there was a father, a very young father with 4 children.
By himself.
And by himself. And it's just so sad and heartbreaking to see these families, all they have been through. And not only the journey, but their stay in the detention centers, which is like, I feel that they're not treated like human beings.
No.
Can you talk a little bit about the situations in the detention centers?
Sure. So what happens is when people are coming in, they're being processed, regardless of what method they come in. Some people come at ports of entry. Some people come in what is referred to as illegally. So they are crossing through an unofficial port of entry. Both are ways to cross, and asking asylum either way is legal. That's something that people have to understand. So let's talk a little bit about the processing part. So a person comes in, they have to be processed. There is also this misconception that people are just being let through. They're actually being processed, and that's where they're having this experience in what feels like detention. It's actually processing. It's actually not an actual detention. It's processing, but they're absolutely detained. They don't have free will. So it's not inaccurate to say detention. But it's temporary, and it's for them to be processed. Fingerprints are taken, photos are taken, demographic information is taken. Where are they going? So who's this family member they're going with? Those addresses are all taken. And then they're being processed by ICE, and they're being processed for deportation because they will have a date in court that they will have to present themselves to. So it's during that processing that CBP or Border Patrol or ICE, all 3 agencies are involved at some level, are screening and providing this shelter, which oftentimes is subpar. And let alone what they're trying to do to provide them shelter, because we also know that there's people being turned away and waiting on the bridge in, what now has, we had our first freeze last night here in this border desert region, and it gets cold. But in addition to providing the shelter during the processing, there are agents that are not receiving the appropriate amount of training, the appropriate amount of visibility, transparency, and accountability. And we hear the stories of the abuse. We hear the stories of how they're treated by these agencies. And that's what's really appalling to us in the advocacy world, is we understand that they have a job to do. But people should be trained and remember their humanity and remember that these people are human beings that have already suffered a great deal and don't deserve to be treated poorly, maybe because somebody doesn't agree, or maybe because somebody is over-politicizing this very humane issue.
Yes. Thank you for that. From what countries do they generally are fleeing or coming from, these refugees?
So just to put things into perspective, Las Americas being a border organization, in the past 31 years, we've helped people from 66 different countries.
Wow.
So people are coming from all over the world. We have people coming from African countries that are being persecuted for different reasons, political opinion, sometimes it's also their sexual orientation. It could be religious, their religion. People are still persecuted for their religious beliefs in this modern day. And so we have people from all over the world. Right now, currently, the demographic looks more like Central Americans, Honduran, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But it also includes Nicaragua. And it also includes countries from South America, such as Brazil. We've seen a lot of people fleeing Brazil, Venezuela as well. That migration is definitely still there. And we do understand that with the caravan, there are some people from Africa, there are some people from Bangladesh. And those are their regular migration patterns. We had a big Bangladeshi population immigrate, come in as refugees back in 2016, and they came through the Mexican border. So, this is not abnormal. We see people from all around the world.
Yeah. What would you like to exhort our audience to do? What would you tell them if you had an opportunity to talk to everybody? Mm-hmm. What would you exhort them to do?
Well, I have to say that it's a privilege to work with Daughters of Charity. And we've been at Las Americas. We've been working with Daughters of Charity for many, many years, and so that's something we're very lucky and privileged to do. So, thank you so much for you all's service and your calling and your mission, which is so closely aligned to what we do. So for us, I think what we need most from the faith-based community is to continue to speak about how ingrained the mission is of helping the refugee, of helping the neighbor in our religion, in the Bible, through the teachings of Jesus Christ. This is what we should be doing. We should be dispelling narratives. We should be helping people. We shouldn't be questioning them. We have to understand, while people are fleeing violence and they're fleeing horrific situations, some people just want a better life. And they're economic refugees, and they also deserve respect. They may not be asylum seekers, and that's okay too. And that's hard for us in this, in the lay, in the secular world. It's almost hard for people to breed compassion for the poor. But that is something, that we really could use help from the faith-based community, is just to continue to put in that, remind people of the moral importance of upholding our values and loving thy neighbor. It's so important. Plus, also, not only is there just so many things just riddled with judgment, it's hard for us to speak out against, because the law isn't always just, and the law isn't always moral. And we know that through our faith-based, our very faith-based brothers and sisters, that this is what you all help us do, is help us spread this word that's so important. And in general, I would say for everyone else, just keep informed, keep up to date with information, but always know that there's always, the media is going to tell one story. We have to recognize that this immigration issue has become overly politicized, and we have to remember it's a human issue. And so to keep informed, and also in opening our hearts and opening our doors with compassion to love thy neighbor, is through the donation of your time and your efforts, and yes, and your money too, to organizations that are really doing the work. I implore people to donate to local organizations. We have great, big, wonderful, robust organizations like the ACLU, who does so much good when it comes to standing up against laws that are unconstitutional. But you also have organizations such as Las Americas. We're doing the work on the ground. We're doing the work with the individual people. And so sometimes we get forgotten. And so I would just say, maybe research who's the immigration network in your community that needs the help. Or who are the people on the ground on the border who need the help. Annunciation House, who is the shelter network and the only shelter network here. Of course, Las Americas. And as we continue we keep our eye on the prize as there's different, these crisis modes that we come into as a community. Las Americas is still serving sometimes the forgotten asylum seeker sitting in the detention center. And we are fighting and we are willing to win his case. Because sometimes the male refugee is overlooked because, of course, there's families. But Las Americas, we always try and keep to our mission, and we help men, women, and children that are in need. And we just always do our best to not forget the people who are often forgotten when we have all of this buzz around the work that we do every single day and that we love to do.
Well, thank you, Linda. It's been, for me, a grace to be part of Las Americas. I have only a couple of months that I've been part of the board, but I'm just so happy to be part of it and to see all the good work you all do with the people here and a lot of people that are suffering, and the need to be heard and to find a safer place to live and a better life for them and their children. So I'm very proud to be part of Las Americas.
And now it's time for your Vincentian Pulse.
Xenophobia. It's a fancy word for fear of the stranger. Our xenophobic tendencies are natural, but they are not inevitable. We are often motivated by impulses for self-preservation, protection, or self-esteem. And because we have an unconscious drive to create social identity through us versus them thinking, just consider the rivalry of your favorite sports team, ideas like security in sameness and fear of difference are introduced through social cues. We are easily and persuasively influenced by social cues that can reinforce xenophobic thinking. But the power of this influence is that it is subconscious. By God's grace, we have an even deeper drive towards truth. As St. Thomas Aquinas brilliantly explains, we have two ways of knowing truth: faith and reason. Through faith, we know that we are called to love one another. Scriptures like 1 Peter 4 tell us to love each other deeply and to offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. In Matthew 25, we are told that it is a service to God Himself when we welcome a stranger. And Leviticus 19 commands us to treat the foreigners among us just as we would a native-born citizen. So while we know all this by faith, it is reason that allows us to break down xenophobic myths, question stereotypes, and distinguish between real and false dangers. Reason helps us challenge impulsive assumptions and move from unconscious bias to conscious, willful acts of love. Reason, when effectively employed, will always resonate with the truths of our faith. So whether you have already drawn foreigners into your us thinking, but harbor resentment and fear of them who have not, or you are struggling with fears of what troubles the stranger may bring, we can all overcome a multitude of sins with love, because God has given us, through faith and reason, all that we need to live in harmony with one another and follow Scripture's most frequent command, to be not afraid.
This has been In the Company of Charity podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.